Cheating is a betrayal that cannot simply be forgiven. The word forgive doesn't seem to fit here. Betrayal is something you either accept and choose to live with or reject outright. But even acceptance doesn't mean it's truly forgiven. It lingers like a shadow, a constant reminder of trust broken. Forgiveness in cases of infidelity often feels hollow, and the scars of betrayal can last a lifetime. When someone cheats, they must understand the gravity of their actions. When the truth inevitably surfaces, they cannot rely on forgiveness as a given. Why do so many, especially women, fail to grasp this reality? A genuine man, a man of integrity, will not tolerate betrayal, nor should he. Remaining in a relationship with a cheating partner is akin to inhaling the smoke of a stranger's cigarette. Dirty, unhealthy, and degrading. Excuses like "he didn't love me," or "I wasn't being fulfilled" are irrelevant. If the relationship has reached its breaking point, divorce is a clean, honest option. Yet, many women stay in failing marriages, seeking fleeting passions elsewhere. A woman who cheats often mistakes infatuation for love, prioritizing a temporary thrill over her family's stability. When caught, these women may proudly leave to pursue their lover, tearing apart everything they've built. Yet, the affair rarely lasts. Eventually, reality sets in. Regret follows, and they find themselves alone, seeking reconciliation with the family they abandoned. Children become collateral damage in their parents' reckless decisions, often dragged into emotional turmoil and manipulation. My story. I've seen betrayal up close. My mother left my father and me when I was barely 2 years old. My father, a man of quiet resilience, never remarried. He poured all his love and energy into raising me, with help from his sister, Aunt Lila, who became like a second mother. Summers were spent at her cottage, playing with my cousins, Aria and Charles. When I was 17, my father died unexpectedly, leaving me utterly alone. After high school, I joined the artillery college and embarked on a military career. As for my mother, she was a ghost in my life, a shadow I didn't care to chase. My father had hidden every trace of her, and I harbored no feelings for the woman who abandoned us. After graduating, I spent time in active service before being assigned to train artillery troops in an African nation. My role was challenging but fulfilling, requiring long days under the sun with a mortar battery and an interpreter to bridge the language barrier. Life was grueling but purposeful. One fateful day, I broke protocol and drank water from a local source, unable to resist the scorching heat. This decision led to hepatitis, and I was sent home for treatment. I spent 2 months in the hospital recovering, and during that time, I met a nurse named Camila. She was charming, warm, and seemed to brighten my otherwise bleak days. Our connection grew quickly, and by the time I was discharged, we were married. Life felt like it was finally falling into place. Camila and I moved in together, and soon, our son Dylan was born. I dreamed of a large family, but Camila had other plans. She insisted she was too young to be tied down by more children, saying she wanted to live for herself. It was a warning sign I failed to heed. My military career kept me away for long stretches. Personal problems had no place in the army, where duty reigned supreme. I missed my family deeply and tried to make the most of my time with them when I was home. But over time, Camila grew distant, her unhappiness evident. Even Dylan began to withdraw from me, sensing the growing tension. Then came the longest separation of all, a 6-month deployment abroad. I tried reaching out to my family through letters and calls, but Camila responded only once. Her reply was cold, filled with hollow, obligatory phrases. It was clear her heart was no longer in our marriage. I hadn't heard from her again. Not a letter, not a word. I suppose everything eventually finds its end. My business trip had wrapped up, and I made my way back to the unit, handed in my documents at headquarters, and headed home. Flying on wings wouldn't even begin to describe the anticipation bubbling within me. When I arrived, Candela wasn't home. Dylan was playing outside in the yard under the watchful eye of a neighbor. The neighbor gave me a puzzled look when she saw me and explained that Candela had asked her to keep an eye on Dylan while she went to the store. There was something in her expression, an unease she seemed to be hiding, but I didn't press her. Taking Dylan's hand, we walked home together. He chattered away, his tiny voice filled with excitement as he told me about his friends at kindergarten and all the things he had been learning. Then he said something that stopped me in my tracks. "Dad picks me up when Mom's busy," he said, His tone as casual as if he were commenting on the weather. "What?" I asked, feeling my chest tighten. "Papa Oliver loves me," Dylan continued cheerfully, "and he promised to get me a big red car." He paused, looking up at me with his wide, innocent eyes. "Uncle, are you going to stay with us for a long time?" My throat felt dry, the words struggling to form. "I'm not your uncle, Dylan," I managed to say. "I'm your dad." Dylan tilted his head, confused. "No, my dad is Oliver. Mom says you and he are going far, far away soon." He grinned, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. "But when you're here, Dad leaves home. You'll stay with us, but not for long, right?" I miss Dad. I couldn't breathe. My mind raced, but I didn't lose control. Somehow, I stayed calm. When we reached home, I gave Dylan the gifts I'd brought and excused myself to the bathroom. The sound of running water drowned out the whirlwind in my head. Then I heard the front door slam. Candela was back. I took my time, composing myself, and stepped out. She was in the kitchen, putting on a bright smile as if nothing was wrong. "Welcome home, Liam," she exclaimed, trying to kiss my cheek. "I'm going to feed you now." I pulled away. "Don't, Candela," I said, my voice cold. "Sit down. We need to talk." Her cheerful facade cracked. She hesitated before slowly sinking onto a stool, her hands trembling. "How long?" I asked, my voice steady. "How long have you been seeing Dad Oliver? And when were you planning to leave?" Candela's face turned pale. She avoided my gaze, her voice barely a whisper. How do you know?" "It doesn't matter how I know," I replied, my tone even. "Just answer me." Tears welled up in her eyes. "Almost a year," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I don't know how it happened. I wanted to stop, but he made me feel alive, Liam. He made me feel like a woman again. Like someone loved." Her voice rose, her desperation evident. "You're never home." "Stop it," I cut her off, standing abruptly. "You're an adult. You've made your choice. I'll file for divorce myself." Her sobs filled the air as I grabbed my duffel bag and headed for the door. "You're not even going to ask who he is," she cried. I paused for a moment, then shrugged. "I don't need to know. Goodbye, Candela." The divorce was quick. The apartment was state-owned, so there wasn't much to divide. I moved into an officer's dormitory and settled into a new rhythm. But Candela made it difficult to see Dylan. I watched from a distance, catching glimpses of my son and the man who had taken my place. Oliver, a young, cocky man with a face full of contempt. A month later, there was a knock at my door. It was Candela. She stood in the doorway, looking smaller than I had ever seen her, her usual confidence replaced by hesitation. "May I come in?" she asked softly. I studied her for a moment, then stepped aside. "Come in," I said simply. And so, the next chapter began. I had no desire to waste my energy or emotions on her. "Your son will soon have nowhere to live," she began defiantly. "They're forcing us to vacate the office apartment. They offered us a hut in the middle of nowhere instead. You have an apartment in the city. Sell it and help your child. What kind of father are you to abandon your own son?" She dabbed at her tears dramatically, trying to elicit guilt. Oliver had been right about her. I stood up, my voice firm. "Camila, I'll give you a minute to leave. And don't look at me like that ever again." Snatching her bag, she dashed out the door without another word. 2 weeks passed in uneasy quiet. One evening, as I returned from work, I saw her near my building, clutching Dylan's tiny hand. "Could you watch Dylan?" she asked hurriedly. "Oliver and I are leaving. We'll find a new place, and I'll come back for him soon." Before I could respond, she looked away, her words hurried and hollow. I knelt to hug my son tightly, feeling his small frame tremble against mine. Someone else's child might be a burden to another man, but not to me. Dylan was my world now. She never came back. A month later, I was transferred to the south, and life became a whirlwind. Work demanded my all, but having Dylan with me was what truly mattered. He grew up quickly, maturing faster than I expected. At first, he would ask where his mother was, but over time, he stopped. It was as though he had silently come to understand the truth. Camila never reached out, though I left my new address at the hostel, just in case. Life was hard. I even considered remarrying for Dylan's sake, to give him a mother. But I quickly realized that few women would willingly embrace a child that wasn't their own. People say a man should love his adopted child unconditionally, but society rarely expects the same of a woman. So, I stayed single. If someone entered my life, I kept them at a distance, unwilling to let anyone harm the bond one shared with my son. 15 years passed like this. Much had changed. Dylan was now in the military academy, and, as fate would have it, I returned to my hometown. A new military school had been opened, and I was appointed its head. I never imagined myself wearing a general's insignia. Life felt surreal. Days blurred into a frenzy of work, but once classes began in the fall, the pace eased slightly. One quiet evening, I realized I had run out of bread. Nothing special, but dinner wasn't the same without it. Too lazy to dress up, I threw on a hoodie and sweatpants and headed to the nearest supermarket. At the checkout, a slender woman caught my eye. My stomach dropped. It was Camila. What was she doing here? She noticed me, her gaze sweeping over my casual attire. "I see life hasn't been kind to you," she sneered. I forced a smile. "What makes you say that?" She smirked. "Oh, I can tell." Her voice dripped with satisfaction, as though my perceived misfortune validated her choices. She clearly expected me to ask about her life, but I remained silent. Frustrated, she blurted, "He's doing well. Graduating from the academy in 2 years." Her words stung, but I gave no reaction. Just then, a young girl approached Camila, clinging to her arm. "This is Vera," she said, her voice tinged with pride. A man, her husband, joined them, uninterested in our conversation. I caught the gleam of wealth in their clothes and demeanor. Camila straightened, flicking her hair back with practiced ease. "Not everyone gets a successful career," she said smugly. A young man interrupted us at that moment. "Sir, your car is ready." Camila's husband glanced up, startled. "Your car?" I nodded. The young man gestured to a sleek black executive vehicle parked outside. Without a word, I stepped into the back seat. Camila and her companion stared, their smug expressions replaced by shock. 2 years later, I stood proudly at Dylan's graduation from the military academy. As I approached him, I noticed a familiar figure nearby. "Camila." She turned, her eyes widening as they took in my general's uniform, a stark contrast to the sweatpants I had worn the last time we met. "I came to congratulate Dylan," she said hesitantly. "You don't mind, do you?" Dylan glanced at me, his expression unreadable. I spoke softly but firmly. "Son, this is your mother." Dylan's voice was steady, but his words cut like a blade. "I don't have a mother. The one I once had died a long time ago." He turned to me, his face resolute. "Let's go, Dad. I still need to pick up my orders at the drill hall." As we walked to the car, I glanced back. Camila stood frozen, her hands clasped to her chest, watching us drive away.